Again, my name is Gwen Sorley, and we will be talking about how to cultivate happiness in an ADHD body and mind. However, this webinar is important for all of us. It doesn't matter if you have ADHD or if you don't have ADHD. We all should have this information and know what can lead to happiness. When you look around you right now, or maybe in your day-to-day, you see a variety of individuals, all of different genders, different ages. We all have different backgrounds, but we have one thing in common. We all want to be happy. And the question is, what makes us happy? They recently did a survey of millennials, and they asked millennials, what would make them the happiest? What do you think the number one response was? They asked millennials what would make them happy. Go ahead and type in the chat box what you think the answer was when they did that survey. I want to see a general sense of what you think they would say. Christine says more time. Shayla says financial security. Teresa says money. Robert says time and freedom. Lucia says PlayStation 4 or Xbox. Funny. And many of you, though, are saying money. And that is the number one response. The number one response was money would make them happiest. And the number two response was fame. And we're probably all a little bit guilty of this at some point in our lives, where we have thought, well, if I work harder and I earn more money and I get that bigger promotion and I can buy this house or I can get this car, that's what's going to make me happy. But as we age, as we go through life, many of us figure out that it's not necessarily money and things that make us happiest. So the question still remains, what does make us truly happy? The longest study of its kind done on happiness is the Harvard study of adult development. In this study, it started back in 1938 during the Great Depression. And they started tracking 724 young teens. And these teenagers, they tracked throughout their lives. This study has been going on for over 80 years now. When they started the study, they had two groups of individuals. One group were teenagers who were students in Harvard. The other group were teenagers who were from the poorest areas of Boston. And they tracked these individuals throughout their lifetime as teens, young adults, middle-aged, all the way through the aging process. And even 60 of them today are in their 90s and still involved in this study. So every few years, they would do a survey. They would ask these individuals all sorts of questions on their socioeconomic status, their education level, their jobs, their families, their health, their happiness. Not only would they do surveys, but they did brain scans, they did health and wellness checks, they did video recordings of these men interacting with their family, their spouses. And what they found, it's not at the end of the study because the study's still going on, but what they have found is that close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy and healthy throughout their lives. Close relationships made the difference. At one point, the researchers wanted to see if they could actually predict which of the participants would be happiest at the age of 80. So they looked at all of the data of these individuals at the age of 50. And what they found was the greatest predictor was how satisfied they were with their relationships. The individuals who reported at 50 years old they were the most satisfied with their relationships were the happiest and healthiest at age 80. So their socioeconomic status did not really factor in. Their job did not factor. Their cholesterol level at age 50 was not a factor. The greatest factor on their health and their happiness was the ability for them to develop strong, meaningful relationships. So if that's the answer, if the conclusion is the key to happiness is meaningful relationships, then you may be thinking, well, I'm great then, because I have 369 friends on Facebook. I have 1,247 followers on Instagram and likes, and probably that many on YouTube as well. But keep in mind that all relationships are not created equal. It is the quality of the relationship that is important, not the quantity of social connections. You can have 369 friends on Facebook and still be lonely. You can be lonely in a marriage. You can be at a party and surrounded by people and be lonely. It is the quality of the relationship that's important. And our relationships, the quality of our relationships have been in decline a little bit. Actually, over the last 25 years, the number of close relationships we've been reporting have been declining. That means when we are asked, how many friends do you have right now that you can really rely on, that you can depend on no matter what? 25 years ago, the average was about 4. Now the average is 1, with many people indicating that they don't have anyone that they can depend on or rely on. It's important we put time and effort into developing meaningful relationships. Right now, we live in a society where we want the quick fix. We want the instant gratification. And what could be faster than clicking like on Instagram or friending someone on Facebook? And as you see your social connections rise online, you do get that immediate sense of gratification. But are those friendships lasting? Are they meaningful? When we are developing meaningful relationships that are going to last, it takes time, it takes effort. Sometimes it's messy, but it is important for us to do this. Because as our social connections have increased, we have an epidemic of loneliness. 1 in 5 Americans now say that they are lonely. And although our social connections online may increase, our face-to-face time with our friends is decreasing. If you look at this chart here, you'll see teens who meet up with their friends almost every day. Okay, this poll started in the 1970s, and you can see from the 1970s through about 2017, that number has declined, with the largest decline happening right around 2010. And what came out in 2010? What was increasing in 2010? Can any of you guess? The use of smartphones. As the use of smartphones was increasing, the time we were spending face-to-face with friends was decreasing. In 1970, there were about 52% of 12th graders who reported they met up with their friends face-to-face almost every day. By 2017, that number decreased to only about 28%. So that's a pretty dramatic decrease. So the amount of time we're spending face-to-face is decreasing over time. And this is an issue because those teens now report they're lonelier. Lonely teens jumped from 18% in 2012 to 37% in 2016. That's pretty significant in just 6 years' time. This is important because as loneliness increases, then also anxiety has increased and depression has increased. This is all very important information because happiness and loneliness, they are not just emotions. They actually affect our overall health. If we look at strong relationships versus loneliness, people with strong relationships experience longer lives, good physical fitness, lower blood pressure, stronger immune system, less cognitive decline, better heart health, and overall more happiness. However, as opposed to loneliness, people who report they are lonely have higher blood pressure, higher risk of heart disease, obesity, weakened immune system, cognitive decline. In fact, individuals who reported they were lonely were twice as likely to develop dementia as they aged. Also, it was associated with physical pain. A group of researchers looked at individuals who were aging, they were older in their years, and they all had very similar forms of arthritis. They were in the similar stages of arthritis. And the individuals who had strong relationships reported less pain than those individuals who reported they were lonely. The people who reported they were lonely actually said they were in more pain. So strong relationships versus loneliness, happiness versus loneliness, both affect the body and the mind. So it is important that we take time to really develop these relationships. So how do we develop strong relationships? What are the steps we can take? And we can spend hours, we can spend days on talking about different strategies to develop strong relationships, but we have only a little bit of time together today. So I want to give you some actionable strategies that you can start applying today. So I'm going to focus on one thing, and that's communication. Communication is key to developing strong relationships. And, this is really important because some of you may be saying, and even Retta brought up the pandemic and having less face time. And that's true. We have had less face time because of the pandemic. So you could argue with me that, we would love to work on communication, but it's difficult because the pandemic has made it hard. We've been socially isolated at many times because of that pandemic. But consider World War II. If we look at World War II and the communication that they had, their main form of communication were letters, writing letters. And in 1940s, during World War II, the average person wrote about 6 letters in a week. And these letters were heartfelt. They took time. They were meaningful. These individuals wrote letters in order to keep their relationships back home strong. These letters also helped with the heart health and the mind health of every individual going through this time. So this type of communication, even though they weren't able to be face-to-face, this was important. I wanted to give you this example. This is just a little snippet of this letter that was written in 1942. Dearest sweetheart, I didn't write to you last night, honey, but I guess you won't miss one letter. You get my mail in bunches anyhow. Besides, I always write about the same subject. Hundreds and thousands of books were written about it also. I'm talking about love. That's just the beginning of the letter. It goes on and on from there. That's just a little piece of it. These letters were so meaningful and heartfelt. They're so powerful that there's an entire section of a World War II museum in New Orleans that is dedicated to displaying these letters. So fast forward 80 years. This letter was written in 1942, and now we're in 2022. So 80 years later, what would a museum display look like that shows our communication? This is how I picture it. This is our communication 80 years later. Most of us cannot imagine writing the way that woman wrote, right? Writing such lovely thoughts down on paper. If we want to express love, we click the heart emoji. And if we're lucky, then we get a heart emoji back. Or maybe we even get a kissy face. This is our communication now. That quick fix, that instant gratification, something that doesn't take long. Communication skills take longer. We have to start putting some effort into our communication. And communication can be difficult for all of us, but communication skills are especially difficult when ADHD or weak executive function is involved, because ADHD and weak executive function can negatively affect communication skills. If you have ADHD or weak executive function, you may have difficulty with inhibitory control, right? Because inhibitory control is a process of executive function. So what that looks like in your communication skills is that you oftentimes interrupt conversations. You don't mean to, but you lack that inhibitory control. If we look at attention as a whole, if you have a hard time paying attention, some of you can relate to this. You may be looking at your friend and your friend is telling you something and they continue this story for about 20 minutes, and about 15 minutes in, you realize you have no idea what they're talking about because you have a lack of your ability to actually direct and sustain your attention for long periods of time. If you have weak executive function, you may also have a difficult time with emotion regulation. And if you have a hard time with emotion regulation, that means something small might happen. There may be a small circumstance, or your friend may say something, or your spouse may say something that they don't really see as a big deal. But because you have difficulty with emotion regulation, you make it into a very big deal. You have an emotional outburst. And that's just a part, it's a process of executive function that we can develop, we can improve, but it does take time. It does take specific cognitive skill development in order to improve. You may have a difficult time with processing speed. You may be a slow processor. So although you are paying attention, you're trying to pay attention, it takes a little bit longer for you to process the information and then respond. And your friend or your relative may think that you're just not paying attention and you don't care. And that's not so. It's due to slow processing. Your memory may also be affected. You may just have an attention difficulty where you don't make friendships a priority, or you may miss certain social cues like the look or the shake of the head. And because you miss those social cues, you tend to respond what seems inappropriately or impulsively. Many of you can probably relate this with your children, or perhaps you're a teacher or a clinician and you can see that in your clients or your students. Do any of you see that with your children? I get that all the time where parents will call in and they'll say, my son is so sweet, and yet he has such a hard time keeping friends. And that's typically because they're missing the look, they're missing the shake of the head, and they're having difficulty responding appropriately. Now, within Play Attention itself, we do have a social skills program. And I wanted to mention that because many of you here today are current clients. So if you haven't incorporated social skills into your Play Attention program, it may be something for you to consider. Social skills is part of our masterclass. And if you're here today and you do want to incorporate that, I'll make certain that you receive 50% off of that social skills program so that you can incorporate it into your current program. You can let me know at the end of the webinar if you're interested in incorporating that. Also, if you are looking at all of this information on ADHD and weak executive function and how it affects your communication skills or your child's communication skills or your client's communication skills, you may not have ever considered how weak executive function is affecting communication. And if you are interested, and many of you have attended these webinars in the past, and we talk about the assessment tools that we have available. We have 2 assessments available. So if you're sitting there right now and you're thinking, well, I wonder what the root cause is. And could I find out more information about the root cause with my child or with myself or my client? You may want to consider doing a focus or a brief assessment. Focus is a computerized test of attentional control. It takes 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, we receive a full report that tells us how you or your child or client performed compared to the performance of their peers. And one thing that's really interesting, we look at consistency and performance. We can also look at processing speed there, impulse control, your ability to filter distractions, both auditory and visual, which is important because if you're constantly distracted during a conversation, that can definitely affect communication skills. The brief is a behavior rating of executive function. So that is an online survey where we get a great overall view of your executive function on a day-to-day basis. Now, typically each assessment is $50 and we do a 30 to 40 minute follow-up to review all the results for you, with you, I should say, and make a plan of action to review. So if you're interested in that, again, you will receive 50% off any of our assessments just as a way of saying thank you for attending today's webinar. So if you are now thinking, well, that might be the root cause, but I want more information, go ahead and type in assessment, and one of us will follow up with you to talk about those different assessment opportunities. So that means each assessment, some of you are asking, would be $25, and you'll get that 30 to 40 minute follow-up with one of us. Shayla asks, should it be taken while in treatment with Adderall, for example, or should it be taken without meds? You know, Shayla, if you're talking about, for example, the focus assessment, the brief assessment, you can do at any time. Because, you know, that's an online survey that allows us to see your executive function on a day-to-day basis. If we're talking about the focus assessment, you can do the focus assessment, you know, on medication or not on medication. I tend, you know, and I've been using the focus assessment with clients for many years now, and I tend to try to do the focus assessment when the effects of the medication aren't quite there. You can make that determination. That would be my personal recommendation. So early in the morning or later in the afternoon, whatever works best for you. But whatever we decide, we want to make certain that the conditions are the same. Because if you do start a Play Attention program, and Shayla, I think that you already are a current client, when you're going through the process, we oftentimes will do a pre-assessment, then we may do a mid-evaluation, and then again at post. So we want to make certain that those conditions remain the same. So yes, you just have to write in the assessment if you would like more information about that assessment, and we'll follow up with you. Okay, Eleanor, thank you. Great. Excellent. Yes, you can keep typing and I'll continue. So that's one step we can do, right? We can do an assessment and we can look at what exactly is the root cause? What can we pinpoint and look at, and then make a plan of action with play attention? But what can you take away today? How can you improve communication skills? Like I said earlier, I want to give you some strategies that you can start incorporating today. So I'm going to focus on your head, more specifically, your eyes, your mouth, and your ears. Let's look at each area and see what we can do to improve communication skills in order to start strengthening our relationships and building that foundation towards happiness. First of all, let's start with the eyes, making eye contact. And some of you may be thinking, this already makes me nervous, right? Because sometimes eye contact can cause a little bit of anxiety, or you may get a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to making eye contact. But eye contact is really important for a variety of reasons. When you make eye contact, it shows that you're paying attention. You know, there's nothing more aggravating at times when you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they're looking at their phone, or they're looking out the window, or they keep looking away, or they're looking at their work on their desk, and you're trying to have a conversation and they're not making eye contact. It makes it very difficult to stay engaged with that person and really feel any kind of bond. So first, it shows that you are indeed paying attention. It's a huge part of nonverbal communication, and most of the ways we communicate is nonverbal. That goes back to social cues and being able to pick up on social cues. If you're not making eye contact, it's a lot harder to pick up on those social cues. It can help improve understanding, and it also helps you show and earn respect. So those are some things that you probably already know about eye contact. But here are some things that you may not have realized. Studies reveal that eye contact actually prepares the social brain to empathize by triggering the limbic mirror system. The limbic mirror system. This means when you're talking to someone and you're making eye contact, the neurons that are firing in that person's brain actually start firing in your brain. Isn't that amazing? So that means if you're talking with me and I'm making eye contact with you, and my eyes are communicating joy, your brain will start firing neurons that will make you feel joy. And that sharing of emotional states actually helps strengthen your bond with that other person. Not only that, but when you can share that emotional state, that helps you develop and improve empathy. It also helps you remember what the other person said. And someone asked earlier about when you're communicating via video rather than face to face. Of course, face to face is ideal because even in a video, there's a little bit of a delay. And there have been studies that show even delay in eye contact or a delay in a social cue can not be as powerful as being face to face. However, that being said, there was a study that was done that showed making eye contact during a video call actually improved the person's ability to remember the conversation. And it didn't take much. It was making 30% of eye contact during that video call significantly improved the recall of that conversation. So not only does it help you develop empathy and help strengthen the bond, but it actually will help remember what was said. It can also help with self-awareness, and that means you or your child being aware of what your body is doing while you're communicating. And the researchers believe that The fact that you know someone else is watching you makes you more self-conscious and more aware of what your body is doing. So making that eye contact helps develop empathy, helps with your memory, and helps with self-awareness. Retta asks, do assessments also use same method for adults to determine root cause? Yes, those assessments that I mentioned earlier, Retta, are appropriate for both children and adults. Good question. So here are some tips, right? We're just starting with some small tips. There's lots of different ways. There are, if you're thinking about your younger child, of course, there are lots of games you can incorporate to start working on eye contact. But here are some tips that you can start implementing. Make eye contact before you start talking. Hold your gaze to 4 to 5 seconds at a time. Use hand gestures, right? So if you're making eye contact and then you start feeling that you need to break your gaze, use some gestures to help you just kind of break your gaze momentarily and then come back. Use the triangle technique. The triangle technique is this. So imagine that you have an inverted triangle on your face. So connect the eye with the mouth, with the eye. So an inverted triangle in that other person's face. So you start at the eyes, and then every few seconds, you can look at different parts of the triangle. So you're not constantly looking right at the eyes, but you are making contact somewhere on the face. So try to use that triangle technique. And also, I think I'm covering that one up. Try to use the 50-70 rule. That means 50% of the time when you're talking to someone, make eye contact. But 70% of the time when you're listening, make eye contact. Okay, so try to make a little bit more eye contact when you are listening. So that's the importance and some tips on the eyes. Now let's focus on the mouth. What you say matters. And many of you may be thinking, I never know what to say, or you get really uncomfortable about what you're going to say next, or maybe your child seems socially awkward and just really doesn't seem to know what to say. I am going to give you one phrase that you can start using today with your spouse, with your child, with your friend. One phrase you can start that will actually start that journey towards developing a stronger bond, a better relationship. And that phrase is, tell me more. There was a study done in a hospital, and the patients all had diabetes. So they were severe diabetics. They were in the hospital because of diabetes. And when they sent doctors in to talk to the patients, the doctors, some of them would incorporate this phrase into their communication with their patients. They would be chatting, and at some point during the conversation, the doctor would say, tell me more. The patients who had a doctor who said, tell me more, indicated that they had a stronger relationship. They felt closer. They had a stronger bond with that doctor. Those doctors that said, tell me more, had actually developed a stronger bond with their patients. So that is really key. One little phrase that you can say, and you can kind of see why that phrase makes such a significant difference. When you say to me, tell me more, I know that immediately you're interested. You're actually interested in what I'm going to say. Now, what you can follow up with is what happened next. Because what they found is when the doctors followed up with what happened next, it actually strengthened that bond even further. So 2 phrases you can jot down, or you can remember, but maybe jot them down in case you have a difficulty with memory, and we're going over a lot today. So tell me more and what happened next. Try those in a conversation today and just see what happens. See where that conversation goes, where that relationship goes. But when you say, tell me more, you have a very important job next. You can't just say, tell me more, and then start multitasking, right? If you say, tell me more, your next job is to actually listen to the response. We have to become very active in our listening skills. Listening is not a passive activity. It is very active. So we're going to talk about deliberate listening. If I ask you right now, and please do type in what you think the purpose of listening is, go ahead and type in your response in the chat box. What do you feel the purpose of listening is? What is the purpose of listening? I'm going to give you some time to respond so we can share our responses and you can listen to other people's responses. Good. Excellent. Okay, so let me share some of these. Shayla says understand and connect. Robert says develop understanding. Taylor says to learn another's perspective and hear their life experiences, to get information. Jill says to understand another's perspective. Good. Lucia says to understand what's going on with someone else. Let's see, I can't see your entire name. Oh, it's an email address. Make a connection. Myron says connection, focusing attention. Eusebio says to follow directions. Monroe says to learn. Eleanor says to understand. Aaron says to obtain and process the information that's being provided. Marcia says to get information and to help the other person talk things out, vent, etc. Teresa says build support, empathy, build the relationship, support, and empathy. Great answers. Those are all good answers. It is important to understand that we don't listen to just hear. We listen to understand. And everything that you said was just perfect. Being able to listen in order to understand that other person's perspective, know what they're going through, help them through. And the only way we can truly understand another person's perspective or be any help at all or learn from that other individual is to be an active listener, to be a deliberate listener. The purpose of listening, as many of you said, helps us develop a connection, puts the spotlight on the other person because it isn't about us, helps us understand the other person, makes it more likely that the other person will listen to us, and opens the door to long-lasting human relationships. So what I had in my list really lines up with what you shared. So let's talk about an action plan. And I did write this action plan out. Someone asked earlier if you will be receiving this presentation, and there will be an ebook coming out that will have all of this information in it. So let's talk about an action plan on how to be a better listener. First of all, focus. Do not multitask during a conversation. And I know some of you out there are thinking, but Gwen, I am telling you, I am a great multitasker. And I am here to tell you that you are not a great multitasker. No one can multitask well, okay? The brain is designed to do one thing well at a time. So if you're listening, that is your job. Don't multitask. This means that when someone is talking to you, one thing that we can all do is mute your phone or place it face down on your desk. You could turn your computer monitor off. You could turn the TV off. You could move things away from you. Show the other person that you're taking steps because what they say, what they're saying to you is important. Now, You may be thinking, as I am thinking, that if I walked into my husband's office and he muted the phone, he turned off his computer monitor, at first I would think, I'm in trouble. There's something wrong, right? Because it would be so out of the ordinary. But after I got out, beyond that initial shock of the moment, I would be really happy because it would show that what I'm about to say is really important and that he really is ready to listen. So here's another thing you can do today. Just try it. When you're having your conversation, remember you're going to incorporate, tell me more. What happened next? But before you even start that conversation, mute your phone, put your phone away, look at that person and show them that you're going to actively listen to that response. You want to acknowledge throughout, give small assurances that you're listening. So you may just say, or I understand. Just give them small little assurances that you are still actively listening, that you are involved. I can't see you right now, but if I was lecturing and we were in a group, I would be scanning to see if anyone was agreeing or making some type of a gesture to acknowledge that they heard what I said or understand. Also, summarize what was just said. Not only is this important for the other person because it shows that you are listening, it's important for you. If you have ADHD and you have a difficult time sometimes listening to a full conversation and picking up all the details, by summarizing, you're doing a self-check and you're saying, this is what I heard you say. Give them a summary so that if you did miss important details, they can tell those details to you again. So it helps the other person know that you're understanding, but it also helps you self-check and make certain that you're remembering all of the little details. Pay attention to social cues. We talked about this early. So social cues are critically important for communication. They're expressed through the face, the body, the voice, and motion. Information is often given or reinforced through cues rather than words. And picking up on cues allows you to know when to speak, how your friend is feeling about the topic, or when to end the conversation. If you're not watching social cues, then you may not be noticing that you're getting into someone's space or that maybe your story is going on too long, or how to adjust your behavior throughout. So it is really important that you pick up on those social cues. And finally, empathize, don't minimize. One thing that we are all, I think, 90%, if I had to guess, we're all kind of guilty of this, is listening to someone start their story and say, oh, if you think that's bad, listen to what happened to me. Remember, when you are actively listening, it's not about you. It's about that person. So try not to minimize what they're saying. Avoid that. If you think that's bad, listen to what happened to me. Listen without thinking about what you're going to say next. Because if you're constantly thinking of what you're going to say next, that's when you interrupt, or that's when you miss important details because you're thinking about what you're going to say. Allow your friend to express his or her emotions and feelings without judgment. And finally, try to stay positive. It's really easy for many of us to jump to the negative. That seems easier for us, but try to stay very positive and let yourself focus on the positive parts of the conversation and don't overreact, right? Being positive will help you with emotion regulation. So those are the areas that we can think about when we're doing deliberate listening. And I came up with a mnemonic for you to remember. Face, focus on the individual talking, acknowledge. You can acknowledge with the or I understand. Consider cues. So make certain you're picking up on those social cues, and always empathize. That's a really good thing for you to remember, but something that you can also pass along to your child or your students or your clients to help them remember how to be a better listener. I have a book up on the screen, The Choice, Embrace the Possible. And that book was by Edith Eger. How many of you here, raise your hand, use the raise your hand icon if you have read this book, The Choice, Embrace the Possible. I think everyone on the planet should read this book. But I think that she gives a really good example of being an active listener. Okay, being an active listener. Edith Eger, she's in her 90s. She actually published this book in her 90s, and she is a survivor of Auschwitz. So the book talks about her experiences in Auschwitz, but then it also goes into her time here in the United States, through her career being a psychologist. And she gives these amazing stories that we can all learn from. And one story I think is really a wonderful example of being a deliberate listener or a really active listener. She is with a client, and the client is very distraught because her Cadillac just showed up and it was the wrong shade of yellow. Now, most of us hearing this would immediately jump to, this woman is very petty, right? And we would dismiss the conversation. But Edith states that there is no hierarchy to emotional pain. So although it would be very easy for Edith to say, you think that's bad? Listen to what happened to me in Auschwitz, right? But she believes there's no hierarchy and that you have to truly be an active listener. So as she listened to that individual, she started to understand that this woman wasn't upset about the shade of yellow that her Cadillac showed up. Her emotional distress, she was transferring to the color of the car, but it was really about the fact that she felt emotionally distant from her family. She was having difficulties with relationships. So that was the true nature of what she was struggling with. And you would only understand that if you did what she did, and that was be an active listener. So again, if you haven't read the book before, The Choice, it is an excellent book, and you can learn a lot from that book. So let's summarize what we learned, because all today, our focus was how to be happier. And the exciting thing is that the answer, we can all take action on this. The key to lifelong happiness is strong, meaningful relationships. We can all take steps today to start developing strong, meaningful relationships. It doesn't cost us more money. There's nothing really that can prohibit us from doing this. So this is something all of us can do. And it's important because remember, it is the key to happiness. And it's the quality of the relationship that matters. So although it doesn't take money to improve our relationships, it is going to take time. It is going to take time and effort to develop the quality relationships. And we know this is important because loneliness negatively affects both our body and our brain. ADHD and weak executive function can make communication challenging, but there are some strategies that we can take in order to start improving those skills. We can work on communication skills that include eye contact, because eye contact helps you develop a connection with that other individual. It also helps us develop empathy. You can use your mouth. Start by saying, tell me more. And you can use your ears by becoming an active listener. So there are steps and strategies that we can incorporate today. And I always give you steps and strategies that you can use to start developing different areas. Last time we met, we talked about procrastination and some strategies you could use to help you with procrastination. Today, we're talking about strategies that you can use for happiness and developing strong relationships. In a few weeks, we're going to talk about strategies you can use in order to help you with time management. And although we give you tips and strategies, it is always important that in order to make certain that you can implement these tips and strategies, we do actually address the root cause. Because if you are struggling with attention or weak executive function, it's very important that we start developing core cognitive skills that are necessary for strong executive function. We want you to have all of these strategies in your toolbox for you to use. But in order to really use all of these strategies actively and use them to get great benefit, we need to focus on the root cause. And for many individuals, the cause are weak executive function and difficulties with cognitive skills. So within play attention, we can pinpoint the different cognitive skills that right now are weak for you, but are necessary for strong executive function. And remember, if we can improve executive function, then we can also help you improve those communication skills, because we can improve your impulse control. We can help you improve your ability to direct and sustain your attention over time. And we will customize a plan that will help you develop these skills. And when we pinpoint the different cognitive skills that are most important for you, that will then be incorporated with our feedback technology. This is our body wave technology. If you haven't seen it before, on the back, there are 3 sensors. And those sensors monitor your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And then that information is given over to the computer, where you're allowed to control all of the cognitive exercises just with your mind, or more specifically, your attention alone. And you receive constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not you truly are focused and paying attention. And that's a really important first step in the learning process, right? When we can show you, when we can provide you the experience of what it means to pay attention and keep you in that attentive state while we work on all of these foundational skills like sustained attention and social cues, auditory processing, task completion, working memory, short-term memory. In order to activate any of those activities or those skills, you have to be paying attention. If you're not paying attention, the activity will stop or the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to continue. And we do this because we know the very first catalyst necessary for brain change is attention. If we're going to teach you how to pick up on social cues, and we have a great program within Play Attention to teach you that, we need to make certain you're paying attention during the process. So as long as you're paying attention and the body wave monitor picks up that you're paying attention, you're going to start seeing a card appear. This is just our social skills module. A card will start to appear as you become more attentive. If you start to get distracted, that card will start to disappear because you're no longer actively engaged. Once you're fully attentive, then you're going to see that entire card and you're going to see a picture of a person. And you have to process the information from the card and decide, is that happy, sad, angry? So whatever you're going to do, whether you're working on working memory or social skills or attention stamina within our program, you have to remain actively engaged. So again, if you're interested in doing that assessment, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the different areas that appear to be weakest for you right now and line that up with our different cognitive skills so that we can customize a plan that will help you develop those foundational skills that are necessary for strong executive function. Let's see. Okay, Robert, I think I understand what you're saying, but I will get one of our executive function coaches to reach out to you. It sounds like you haven't actually downloaded those masterclass modules that we were talking about earlier. So social skills is part of our masterclass module. Aaron says, where are these practices done? At home? Uh, yes, we have a home system available. We also have a professional system available for professionals who are working in a school setting or a professional setting. If you are a professional interested in starting a play attention program, next week's webinar is for professionals specifically. But Erin, if you're interested in setting up a play attention program at home and working under our professional guidance, because all of our clients, whether they are home clients or professional clients, are assigned a personal executive function coach to help them every step of the way. Yep. If it's for yourself, then you can set up the home program, Erin, and work under our professional guidance with our executive function coach. Good question. So again, I hope that you have some takeaways from this program. I hope that you understand what really truly makes us happy and some steps you can start taking action on today to help you develop those skills. So a few next steps that you can take. If you want to learn more about play attention, you may want to consider doing a one-on-one consultation with us where we can learn a little bit more about your particular needs and talk about a customized plan. So if you're interested in a one-on-one consultation, just type in consultation in the chat box and we will follow up with you to schedule that one-on-one time. The consultations usually take about 40 minutes so that we have enough time to truly listen to you and what you have to say. And we can talk about a customized plan to help you improve executive function. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to do one of those assessments, go ahead and type in assessment. Now, if you do an assessment, obviously that comes with the consultation. So you would do the assessment first, and then we would do the consultation so that we can review the results during the consultation time. So you can do the consultation without doing an assessment, or you can do an assessment and then do the consultation. If you are interested in what I was talking about earlier, actually incorporating the professional system into your practice or at your school, you'll want to come to next week's webinar. So type in webinar if you're a professional and you would like to start working with others using play attention to help them develop executive function. Type in webinar and we will make certain that you're registered for next week's webinar, where we'll actually talk about incorporating play attention into your professional setting. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, if you are a current client, or even if you're just starting play attention and you want that social skills module, just type in social skills and we'll make certain that you get that module at half price. And yes, some of you have asked, is the assessment half price as well? Absolutely. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to answer some of the questions that are still coming in. So just know that as you type in consultation or assessment or webinar for next week's play attention webinar, or social skills, if you want to incorporate social skills into your play attention program, you can continue typing those things into the chat box and we will follow up with you after the webinar. I will stay here and answer some of the questions I may not have gotten to during the webinar, but I do want to thank all of you because I know some of you have to leave now. I want to thank all of you for attending the webinar today. We really appreciate your time. We hope that you always come here and you always walk away having learned something, having some new skills and strategies that you can incorporate in your day-to-day life. I really, again, I appreciate all of you staying today and listening to the information. And again, look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.